Hey, what's going on, everybody, and thanks for joining us again. Today we're tackling a big one, and we kind of got to look over our shoulder to make sure we're not going to get thrown in cancel jail, because today we're tackling police brutality. What is the problem regarding police brutality? Police brutality refers to excessive and unnecessary use of force by law enforcement officers, resulting in physical harm, psychological trauma, or death. Police brutality is a significant problem because it undermines public trust in law enforcement, increases tensions between police and the communities they serve, and can lead to civil rights violations. I was tempted to admit that we chose today's topic because it's so relevant in the news right now, but that would underplay the fact that it's an alarming topic that has haunted our headlines for decades. It is necessary that we initiate a productive dialogue on this matter so that we may lay this intolerable issue to rest. I believe there are 5 key factors contributing to police brutality: lack of accountability, inadequate training, lack of community trust, mental health and substance abuse, and we can't have real and productive conversations on the topic. Now, lack of accountability. In many cases, law enforcement officers who engage in police brutality are not held accountable for their actions, which can lead to a culture of impunity within police departments. Inadequate training. Many law enforcement officers receive inadequate training on issues such as de-escalation, use of force, and cultural competence, which can increase the likelihood of police brutality. Lack of community trust.
Police officers it is. This is what y'all did when y'all ran Jalen Walker down too, huh? Guns, that's what y'all like to do. Y'all don't like to do smart.
No, you just keep looking at your soft.
Who's soft? Without that badge, you couldn't show nobody that soft. Y'all only hard because y'all got guns. That's the only reason y'all hard. If y'all ain't had them guns, keep it real, would y'all fight us? Y'all got guns. Like, you only hard because you got a gun. You know all these don't shoot.
When the police and the communities they serve have a strained relationship, it can be difficult for law enforcement to effectively do their job and can lead to increased incidents between the police and the people that they brutally serve. Mental health and substance abuse. Police officers who suffer from mental health issues or substance abuse problems may be more likely to engage in police brutality, and there aren't many programs available to them to help cater to these issues and guide them as they try to traverse these difficult terrains. Now, the 5th factor is the one that I find to be the most important. We can't have real and productive conversations on this topic. We all know what this 5th factor was supposed to be: systemic racism and bias. Police brutality is often rooted in systemic racism and bias, and communities of color are disproportionately impacted. And we all know we've heard that before. What we need to address is that the issue of law enforcement exceeding the limits of their force is a threat against all Americans, regardless of the color of your skin. This isn't white versus black. This is the state versus us. I'm sure you have heard the very common narrative before, that we African Americans have to have a talk with our kids that them white folks don't have to have with their kids. And it's about interacting with police. Well, it's about time that this narrative gets put to rest. It's not that these white folk don't have conversations with their kids regarding the interaction of police. The reality of the matter is we are having 2 separate conversations. The conversation in a black home today is that you're going to be murdered, so you must fight back or you must run for your life. And guess what that leads to? The need for force that otherwise would not be there for some guy selling individual cigarettes at a gas station. But these situations ever exceed the regular stop and frisk because we are training civilians, part of the population, that just being stopped by the police is a death sentence. And we need to start having the hard-hitting reality confronting these conversations that white people just don't neglect this conversation with their kids altogether. They have a different conversation. I was sat down by my folks at an early age and we were told, you must trust and respect the police. And guess what? At the point at which that they act out of line, You have to let the court system sort it out. You got to ride with the wave of that current situation. If you're getting put in the back of a cruiser or they're being cuffs slapped on your wrist, well, you just got to roll over and take it and hope that a lawyer can save you. And you could say that's a privilege. You could say that's a narrative of the privilege. But at the end of the day, that's also a narrative that saves lives. So all I'm getting at is that we have a problem with the facts of the matter. Let's take a look at this graph real quick. I have a graph on the screen that reflects the amount of deaths by police currently through 2017 through 2023. Now, if you see there, we will admit there's an increase of about 100 deaths from 2017 till today. Or, well, 23 obviously we don't really have because we have a month. So looking at 22 there, you have about 100 more lives taken. But that totally neglects the increase of population from that time to now. Now, if you see there, let's look at 2017. You have about 458 white people dying at the hands of police and about 228 black people dying at the hands of police, neglecting the other races, Hispanic and what else. But it's pretty consistent across the board. 2018, 459 versus 228. In 2019, 424 versus 251. In 2020, 459 versus 243. Now, here's the only concerning figure as we get to the last 2 years. You see there that about 448 in 2021 were unknown, versus in 2017, only 77 were unknown. That either means we're just going around hitting like the crazy-looking aliens that don't look like any boxes we check, or are we getting worse at taking our analytics? I don't know. It's just very weird how many more unknown people there are in the last 2 years. But what I want to get at is how, one, these tend to reflect the populations, and two, we're not allowed to even look at the analytics because we fear what they tend to show us. Now, all I want to say is we have a real problem about having these conversations and kind of poking the uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, we'll never solve these problems unless we allow people to do so. Police brutality is a complex issue that requires a comprehensive and sustained effort to address. This includes reforms to police training and accountability, building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve, and addressing the underlying social and economic issues that contribute to tensions between police and the public. So now, before we address the solutions, John, how else do you see this problem developing itself?
Thank you, sir. I'm just listening, and I'm like, someone's going to get triggered. I'm like, trigger point, trigger point, trigger point, trigger point. And I'm like, okay, all right.
I hope so.
I'll share with you. Would you like me to share those stories that I told you about?
Yes, please. Illuminate the subject.
Sure. Well, in all, right, the problem is the reporting, and living in fear, and in general, right? I don't remember getting to sit down. I am Latin, and I'm of the shade of brown, and I grew up in a predominantly white Caucasian town, so it was just an interesting story. I guess that's why I wasn't sat down for it. But my parents are from the inner city, New York. So my mom would always say, like, don't mess with the police. Just stay out of trouble. And that was my sit down. Just stay out of trouble.
So real quick, I just want to interject that
Sure.
The one thing that, an interesting context that a buddy of mine kind of instilled in me was when we were young, the relationship with the police. Maybe that's just me as a white person. But like as a young, but again, I'm Greek and Croatian from people that directly immigrated. Like they were DPs, they were displaced people as well. Like, everybody had to find their way to assimilate in a new spot. I wasn't sitting here owning people 100 years ago when this thing started. So I think we unnecessarily project the sins on people that never even got to carry those burdens or crimes. But again, white person, so take it with a grain of salt. But the life experience was, if you get lost, okay, son, if we go to the mall or if we go to the amusement park or we're out and about and you lose mom or dad, you find a policeman. That was it. Like, so there was this blind trust as a child. Now, I don't know if it's because the other communities are just letting them get lost or I don't know what, but like I would assume you'd want to try to instill the same thing into your kid too.
I was told to don't trust anybody. That's what I was told. It didn't even come up. It just didn't come up. Just don't trust anybody.
So okay,
I guess it does come from the idea that if you get in trouble, likely it's because there's no cops around or security around to save you. So it's like, don't trust anybody because if something happens, like, book it.
Implying that the police are going to be there to save you, right? So there's kind of like an innate trust even in that narrative.
Actually, yeah, true. I mean, again, I grew up watching TV, so I just saw cops saving the day all the time. and that was my training.
When you were a child, when we were children, we were told when you get lost, trust the police officer. You can't trust anyone else. Maybe a store clerk, but even then, it's best to find a police officer. And then you got older and you started maturing and getting into riffraff and doing things that you shouldn't and whatever. And it was at that point where you, on your own autonomy, didn't necessarily trust the police because you yourself were getting into things. And that was, now you're 16 and that dynamic has altered to where now you're kind of on the opposite side of the V, as they would say in law school. You're kind of like on the other side of they're kind of they're the antagonist to your situation. So that distrust, it was kind of like they had to earn your trust in now social situations.
For me, it was more like how do I say it? You have this guilty conscience, and then a lot. What I did hear a lot. This is actually what I heard the most. Be careful who you hang out with because you will be associated by just being in the area. So you can be a good person, but because you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, if you're at the scene of whatever crime or whatever situation, you are by default part of the party. And that was the biggest thing. That was the biggest thing that I was told. And so if I was hanging out with friends, I'm like, I don't know what they were doing. And they're always talking as if they did do stuff. And then the one story is I was walking. We were like on the sidewalk part. Like there was like a whole group of us. And we were just like walking to our destination. We were just like walking. There was an avenue that has a bunch of stores. And we would just walk there because we were close. And there was a bunch of us hanging out. And so we just would walk. But you're not going to walk in a single file line. So everybody's just being a teenager. And then there was a cop that drove by and we just were like looking forward, not looking at the cop, looking suspicious as hell. And then the cop's like, boop, boop. I'm like, oh, he's like, what are you doing here? And we're like, oh, you have nothing better to do in our heads. But we didn't think to say that to the cop. We're like, oh no, we're just going to, the Ave, whatever, downtown area. And he's like, okay, but like, stay off the street, like go on the sidewalk, like stay out of trouble, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, don't, you guys look suspicious. Like, don't, like if you see a cop, just like, look, like, don't just ignore us because we're looking for suspicious people. So it was kind of like we gave respect. And then, and to give you like a visual of the color of the crowd, it was mostly brown and usually that one white friend. So that was just our situation, right? And this was in the early, oh my God, the early 2000s when everybody's wearing baggy clothes and listening to Eminem and all that. So that was the story, right? And then the other story I have, if you want, it's called Well, You're Fucked. Because... and this is staying out of trouble, but, some people feel like they're invincible. It shows a cop cam, like a car cam, dash cam, and he's riding the tail of a car. He's trying to pull it over. And then all of a sudden you see a car beeping, and the guy flips the cop a bird, the middle finger. And he's, and the cop's like, oh. And he goes and he just books it and forgets what he was already doing, and he just chases after this other guy that gave him the bird. and he pulls him over. And long story short, he's like, the cop is pissed, and the driver in the car was like, "What were you doing, tailgating that other guy?" And the cop's like, according to, and he had his numbers down, he knew his stuff. He's like, according to this law, blah blah blah. Like, he was reading the license plate, and he was actually about to pull someone over because of something else, but he was just basically doing his job. And he's like, how am I supposed to do my job if I can't follow people? Like, so the guy that flipped him the bird was trying to say, oh, you're breaking the rules, blah blah blah. And then the cop's like, it smells like weed in here. It smells a lot like weed in here. Do you have a medicinal, what do you call it? The medical card? Is that what you call it? And the guy's like, no, I'm not with me. He's like, well, then you're fucked. And that was just my favorite part, because he's just like, you're done. You are fucked. Get out of the car. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's like, get out of the car. And he's like, and then just long story short, like he wrote up the kid, and like it goes to the moral of the story is, if you see, like, if before you judge a cop or anybody doing their job, know a little bit before you start judging, because you're judging based off of your limited understanding, and now you're getting upset, and then on top of that, to act on that is just dumb, just stupid. So back to you, sir.
Well, no, and you raise a great point, and that's how underinformed the public is. And they think because they turned on Judge Judy once, and they've watched a couple internet videos, that now they're TikTok lawyers and they understand how these things work. And I experience it all the time at our courthouse, the amount of people that feel as if they are being disproportionately treated and they're seeing injustice. But the reality is, and then everybody around them, all the lawyers, judges, prosecutors, all the people that understand the system are like, no, on this one, it's totally just and fair. When everybody around them is telling them that it's fair, and they see injustice through an ignorant lens, well, then it's clearly injustice, because look at everybody is in cahoots. It's like, no, everybody has an understanding that you don't. And see, John, another reason why these types of conversations are so important. The dialogue becomes a murky quagmire the moment we conflate kids walking down the street doing nothing and harmlessly just existing with situations where adults are acting out aggressively during a detainment or stop or interaction with the police. We can't conflate the two. Let me cut to a clip that will kind of flush my point out further and give a little context.
Hey, sir, how the f are you doing? Motherfucker, I hope you ready to run today. Woo, woo. Hell no. Woo, woo.
So again, if the situation is, I hope you got your running shoes on, catch me if you can, F you, how do we even pretend we're surprised that that situation requires enhanced force than if it were to otherwise have just been, here's my ID, or here's my name, or I'm not going to supply you any of that because I don't have to, but I'll at least address you civilly. Again, we don't train people on the right things. We need to address the fact that your dialogue with the police should not be, F you, I don't have to tell you that. It can be, well, officer, I know my rights, and I'm not going to impede upon your ability to do your job, but I'm not legally required to do so. If and when I'm legally required to supply you of some sort of information or allow you into the premise, for a search, or allow you to search my bag, just know, officer, that I am not going to legally impede your ability to do your job, but I personally do not give you that permission. Again, that disarms them immediately. But if we just tell them, F you and run, how do we also continue to be surprised that that officer reacts with equal force? And again, John, I'm not trying to overexhaust this point. I just wanted to have a real-world example that is contrast to your real-world example. And I think the conversation gets derailed because we're not allowed to live in a free marketplace of ideas where both of those situations are acknowledged together. But let me just paint a picture. John, funny thing is, how many of these do you think we've done so far? We did one twice and didn't post that solutions yet, and we've probably done we've probably posted like 10 of them. And we had a recent conversation where like minorities came up slightly, and I'm like, I don't even know what John is. I'm like, is he a white guy? Because if he's a white guy, then like, ooh, he shouldn't have said that. But then I'm like, you know what? My heart this whole time, I thought you were mixed. I thought you were half black and half white, and I was like, so he could kind of get away with it. So what does all of this mean? Now I find out how many episodes later, as if any of it mattered ever, because it doesn't, that you're none of the above. And it goes to show that all of these are made up false lines that don't even matter. I get portrayed as evil white guy, but then I get to go, yeah, my grandmother hid and hollowed out trees from Nazis in Greece, and we're not even Jewish. So what do you do about that one, right? Like, we're just a whole slew of anomalies. It's like, no, it's just you can't put humans in boxes. Let me throw just a statistic at you, because it will make you miserably uncomfortable.
Nice.
Only 1.6% of U.S. citizens owned slaves in 1860. Mic drop, reality check. Wake up, folks. Nobody owned slaves except for 1.6% of the country. So now they lead you to believe that, and that's 1.6% of voting citizens in America. That means 98.4% of U.S. white people never owned anybody. In fact, they also worked for the same crooks that took advantage of this human labor system. Okay,
but are we assuming that the people that didn't register to vote didn't have slaves? Is it possible?
Yeah. Well, no. We're talking about U.S. registered voters, so that's got to be all white males, right? So 1.6% of white males that voted didn't even have slaves.
And that's a small percentage there, too.
1.6% of them did have slaves. 98.4% of them did not. So all I'm getting at is now we fast forward the clock 200 years and go, now all of you, even the ones that came from the trees in Greece and Grgat, last name, mountain people in Croatia, all of you need to pay reparations for these poor people. It's like, yeah, no, none of us got the benefits of those human rights violations. And at the end of the day, looking at the 98.4% of white people that were alive at that time in America is the wrong direction. You need to, and again, that's why I emphasize in our problems that it's not white versus black. It's us versus the state. That 1.6% of people that own slaves didn't grow up to be that accountant that lives next to you in suburbia. It's the Waltons. It's the Rockefellers. It's the big families that are controlling the whole conglomerate that benefited from owning people. The rest of us regular schmucks, that's all we were. The same regular schmucks next to you, still suffering with the same issues. And that's why I just want to double down on, we need to redirect our focus. And all of this like trigger language as we keep pointing to. And one, if you get triggered and now you're turned off, you have no ability to have a conversation. What? Now there's no purpose to this. We've lost. Secondly, we need to, the only way to beat it is to have the conversation. So not only are you useless, but now you're counterproductive. We need to get to the heart of it. So John, I guess at this point, do we present the solutions?
I think it's time to present the solutions.
Let's hit it. Time for our solutions. There are several solutions that have been proposed to address police brutality, including 7 main approaches: increased accountability and transparency, police training and reform, community-oriented policing, independent investigations and oversight, limiting military-style equipment, mental health and addiction support, and allow for real and meaningful dialogues on the issue. Now, increased accountability and transparency. Implementing body cameras, improving complaint processes, and making disciplinary records more accessible can help hold officers accountable and their actions and increase transparency in policing. Police training and reform. Providing regular training on issues such as de-escalation, use of force, and cultural competence can help reduce instances of police brutality. Police departments should also consider implementing early warning systems to identify and intervene with officers who have a pattern of problematic behavior. Community-oriented policing. Building trust between the police and the community is key to reducing police brutality. This can be achieved through initiatives that encourage positive interactions between police officers and community members, such as community meetings, neighborhood walks, and youth programs. Independent investigations and oversight. Independent civilian oversight boards and special prosecutors can provide impartial investigations into cases of police brutality, helping to increase accountability and build trust in the criminal justice system. Limiting military-style equipment. The transfer of military equipment to local police departments can escalate tensions and contribute to the use of excessive force. Restricting the availability of military equipment can help reduce the militarization of police departments. And this is low-key incredibly important. Mental health and addiction support. Addressing the mental health and substance abuse needs of police officers can help reduce instances of police brutality by reducing stress and providing support to those in need. Now for the most pertinent solution. Allow for real and meaningful dialogues on the issue. For too long, we've been forced to tiptoe around the issue, and the social police have made it a cancelable offense to even discuss the topic. We need to start addressing the real facts of the matter and no longer curtail to people's feelings if we're going to have any hope of ever getting beyond this issue for everyone's sake. It is important to note that these solutions are not a panacea, and their effectiveness will vary based on local context and implementation. Addressing police brutality requires a comprehensive and sustained effort from law enforcement, policymakers, community leaders, and the public. All right, so guys, those are my solutions. John, what do you have for us?
There's a saying, you are only as big as the things that bother you. And if you think about that, the things that bother you would have to be really big things. And if a certain scenario or situation is bothering you, you have to figure out why it's bothering you. The relationship you have with your local police should be close. It is not. And in our culture, it's been, at least the culture I'm used to, I say TV culture, if anything. No, the culture I'm used to is the cops are just stay out of the way. Don't talk to them. If you talk to them, you're going to say something and you're going to be in trouble. It should be, hey, you know what? Maybe the community should encourage more engagement with the cops, like you said, right? Have meaningful conversations. Build that relationship so the fear factor is not there, right? When you fear something, the acronym is what? Forget everything and run. So let's not live in fear. Let's educate ourselves on, everything nowadays is all education, right? And awareness based. So build that up and build that communication. There's so many things that can be shared and discussed on this topic, but I think if I were to say something to kind of sum up, and the most important thing in my opinion, if for anybody listening, build that relationship, build awareness, educate yourself, don't live in fear, live in prosperity, live as if you're going to thrive, live in not the assumption that nothing is wrong, but with the awareness that of the situation, right? Cops are going to be tense. This social media has not made it easier. And then people are making the situation worse by antagonizing them. Like, they don't know. Whenever I pull a cell phone out of my back pocket, I'm thinking if I'm talking to a cop and let me just get my phone, and it looks like I'm about to pull something out of my, like a gun or something, because of the social media and a lot of people bringing up the issue, it's creating more fear, and you're going to have more tension. So that is my That's my 2 cents. Just really educate yourself again and build those relationships and communicate.
I think those are great points, John. And the reality of the situation is this. We need to address police brutality in multiple facets. There's police brutality in the abstract, and that's where I emphasize we need to have real, down-to-earth conversations. Another hard-hitting reality is that today's privilege, I'm sorry, is not being white or melanin in your skin. The reality is it's having a two-parent household that cares about you. Children growing up in homes where two parents have been married continuously are less likely to experience a wide range of problems from academic, social, emotional, cognitive, not only in childhood but later in adults as well. In two-parent families, for example, children typically have access to more of the economic and community resources because parents are able to pool their time and money and energy, and children tend to be more successful coming from a focused home, and then they tend to carry that focus themselves. I could go on forever down a list of situations or facts showing how important and effective it is to have a two-parent household. And again, that doesn't mean two parents that are modern family. It's having people in your home that care about you and care about your whereabouts. So again, if we can't have these real conversations, we result in telling people, run for your life, and then they fight for their life, and then they lose that life. So, again, in the abstract, just police brutality, a solution is having these hard-hitting conversations. But what about the real world? You are in a situation where a police officer is exceeding their force or going outside of the bounds of what is allotted to them. I know this is scary, and this is not the solution you might want to hear, because you don't trust them either, but at some point, you got to trust somebody. I would say in this situation, have faith and trust the attorneys. There's a lot of depth in this quagmire they call law, and these are people that have sat down and learned all the intricacies of how that officer is supposed to approach you. I've said forever, it is a major dilemma that I'm struggling through law school, and I said, man, if I'm not good enough to get through this because the standard is so high and we're cutting the bottom 20% every semester, so it's so competitive, and if I don't make this, I'll just be an officer. I'll be a police officer. What does that say? It should be scary to you that the standard is higher just to defend yourself from the law versus being the law. So again, there will be instances where you, the TikTok lawyer, might have a better understanding of the law versus that police officer. That doesn't mean the answer is to pull out the metal baton in your back pocket and try to escape, because guess what? That's how you get statues made of you and candle lightings at night for the whole community, because you're no longer with us. You would have more of an impact if you sought it through a court of law and that officer lost his job, or the police department was reprimanded, or a Miranda right was created in your name. That is how justice is sought out. So, in the real world where you're in the situation, you yourself are being transgressed against by the police inappropriately, ride the situation out because you just want to survive to tomorrow. And then tomorrow, let your family, the people that care about you, and the law experts save you. Then there's one other layer that we didn't really address, John, and that's also a real-world situation. What do we do about the situation where you're in public and you see someone else being inappropriately addressed by the police? Guess what the answer is not? This. That isn't it. That's not it. So don't pull out your phone. World Star is not the answer. So what you will do is either insert yourself in the situation, but also you are then risking yourself for being inappropriately transgressed against. So just wrapping up briefly, stay away from these types of situations as best you can, but guess what? They choose you. So in the situation where it chooses you, don't go for the likes and follows or the World Star virality, but what you need to focus on is getting assistance from the community around you, whether that be corralling, I don't know, the closest person, calling other people, I guess you're right, you can't call the police, so what do? That's where you need to just start. Man, did I just contradict myself? Maybe you do record. What do you say, John? What do you do in that situation?
Oh man, I'm glad
Because
you're asking.
then at least you have evidence that
yes,
like you
record
can supply in the long run. I mean, let's agree. George Floyd doesn't get as far as he does without people with their phones. So I guess there's a balance to this. You need to seek out help because that's where you're going to actually have an impact. So seek around you. But then also, I guess if your hands are tied and there's nothing else you could do know that you do have a legal right in public to record them, no matter what they say and no matter how angry they get. So record them. But, I take it on balance. Try to actually have an impact. John, where can they find you?
You can find me first, record and get a lawyer. So you can find me at newagehuman.com. I'm on social media for Instagram at Jon Astacio, JONASTACIO. I'm also on YouTube, New Age Human. You can do a search there.
Awesome. Guys, if we made you laugh, we made you think, the best thing you could do to support this show is share this clip. If you liked it, that means somebody else is going to. So take that clip, the link, put it on your Facebook, text it to people. That's what really, really helps us out. So like I said, the best thing you can do to support us is share that clip. Otherwise, you can find all of our content at our website at www.rethinktankpodcast.com. And you can catch me on all the social medias at Grgat57. Otherwise, guys, we'll catch you next week. Peace. See ya, bye.